Have you ever noticed that some people do not just survive stress, but somehow become wiser and steadier because of it? Have you ever wondered why the same pressure can break one person and build another? As if the difference is not the event but the inner training. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are exploring a powerful pairing of ideas that can completely change how you relate to discomfort, uncertainty, criticism, and change. Emotional equanimity and antifragility. Equanimity is the capacity to remain balanced, present, and kind in the middle of pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Antifragility is the idea that some systems do not merely resist stress, but actually improve because of stress when the stress is the right dose and the response is skillful. Put them together and you get a life-changing possibility. You can train your mind so that challenges become training rather than trauma, lessons rather than life sentences, fuel for awakening rather than fuel for bitterness. Let me start with a story that makes this real. Imagine someone named Riley. Riley is talented and sensitive. Riley cares a lot about doing things well and being seen as competent. In quiet moments, Riley even feels spiritually curious, like there must be a calmer way to live. But daily life keeps proving the opposite. A harsh comment from a friend can ruin the day. A small mistake can trigger hours of self-criticism. An unexpected change can cause panic. Riley tries to avoid stress by controlling everything, but control never lasts. So stress keeps returning, and each return feels like proof that Riley is fragile. One day Riley hears a teaching about emotional equanimity. The teacher says something simple. You cannot control what arises, but you can train how you relate to what arises. Then the teacher adds an idea that surprises Riley. The goal is not to remove all stress. The goal is to learn from stress, so you become less afraid of it. Not because you become numb, but because you become capable. Riley feels skeptical. Stress has never felt helpful. Stress has felt like fire. But the teacher explains that fire can burn a house down or it can cook your food. The difference is the container and the skill. That container is equanimity. So Riley decides to experiment for a month. Not with extreme retreats or dramatic practices, just with a new relationship to discomfort. The first experiment begins in a small moment. Riley receives a message that feels critical. The old pattern is immediate reaction. Heart races. Chest tightens. Mind starts defending. Riley either fires back or collapses into shame. Either way, the mind loses freedom. This time, Riley tries something different. Riley reads the message and pauses. One breath, not to force calm, but to feel what is happening. Tightness in the throat, heat in the face, pressure in the chest. Thoughts rushing to explain and accuse. Riley labels quietly. Hurt, anger, fear. That labeling is not a trick. It is a way of stepping out of fusion. When you can name an emotion, you are not completely inside it. A small space appears. Then Riley tries the key move of equanimity. Riley allows the sensations to exist without immediately acting them out. This is not suppression. Suppression pushes down and pretends it is gone. Equanimity stays present and lets the wave move through while maintaining awareness. Riley waits a few minutes before replying. In those minutes, something changes. The intensity drops slightly. The mind becomes clearer. Riley can now respond with honesty instead of reactivity. Riley writes a simple message asking for clarification and expressing feelings without attack. The conversation becomes more constructive, even if it stays uncomfortable. Riley notices something important. The mind did not collapse. The mind did not explode. The mind stayed. That staying is strength. Now let us connect this to antifragility in a way that is practical. Fragile means you break under stress. Robust means you resist stress and stay the same. Anti-fragile means you benefit from stress because it forces adaptation and learning. In emotional life, most people try to become robust by avoiding triggers. They curate everything. They avoid conflict. They avoid feedback. They avoid risk. They avoid hard feelings. This can create temporary comfort, but it often increases fragility because the nervous system never learns that it can handle discomfort. Then when discomfort inevitably arrives, it feels catastrophic. Anti-fragility is different. It says you can grow capacity through well-chosen challenges, small doses, and wise responses. Like muscles, a muscle grows when it is stressed and then allowed to recover. If you never stress it, it weakens. If you stress it too much, it tears. The growth happens in the sweet spot. Equanimity is the skill that helps you find the sweet spot emotionally. Riley begins to see this. Each time Riley stays present with an uncomfortable emotion without feeding it with a catastrophic story, the mind learns. The next time the same trigger appears, it is slightly less overwhelming. Not because Riley is colder, but because Riley is more capable. The nervous system begins to trust itself. This is emotional anti-fragility. Discomfort becomes training data instead of a threat. Now, an important detail. Anti-fragility does not mean you seek pain. It means you stop treating every discomfort as danger. You stopped reading every negative emotion as failure. You stopped reading stress as proof you are broken. You learn to work with stress intelligently. So Riley sets a clear intention. I will train my response, not chase perfect comfort. Then Riley introduces small practices. One practice is the pause, one breath before reacting. Another practice is feeling the body, feet on the ground, shoulders soft, jaw unclenched, breath natural. Another practice is questioning the story. Is my mind predicting disaster? Is my mind trying to make a verdict about my worth? Another practice is choosing the next action based on values. What is kind? What is honest? What is wise? These practices seem simple, but they change everything because they change the habit chain. Event leads to feeling, leads to story, leads to action. When you interrupt the chain, you change karma. Karma here means the momentum of habitual reactions. When you repeatedly interrupt reactivity, you build a different momentum. That momentum becomes your future mind. That is destiny in a practical sense. Riley experiences this in a bigger challenge. Riley gives a presentation and makes a mistake. The mistake is not tragic, but it is visible. Riley feels embarrassment surge. The old pattern is mental punishment. Replay the mistake. Judge the self. Hide. Avoid future speaking opportunities. This avoidance would preserve comfort short-term but increase fragility long-term. This time Riley tries equanimity. Riley acknowledges embarrassment as sensation. Hot face, tight stomach, thoughts of being judged. Riley breathes and stays present. After the presentation, Riley asks for feedback. Riley learns that the mistake was minor and the content was strong. Riley also learns a few improvements for next time. Here is the anti-fragile moment. Because Riley did not collapse into shame, Riley gained skill and confidence. The mistake became a teacher. The stress made Riley better. Now we need to talk about an important pitfall. Some people confuse anti-fragility with toughness. They think the goal is to become hard. They push themselves into overwhelming stress thinking it will make them strong. But overwhelming stress can traumatize. That is not anti-fragility. That is damage. Real anti-fragility is paired with compassion. You stress the system in a manageable way and you support recovery. This is why equanimity must be warm. You cannot build lasting strength with inner cruelty. So Riley also practices self-compassion. When Riley fails, Riley does not insult the self. Riley speaks inwardly like a wise friend. This hurts. This is human. I can learn. I can rest. I can try again. That tone matters because the inner tone becomes the inner environment. A hostile inner environment makes you more fragile. A kind inner environment makes you more stable. Now let us deepen the psychology. Why does equanimity create anti-fragility? Because equanimity reduces secondary suffering. The first layer is the event or the raw feeling. The second layer is the mind adding extra arrows. This should not be happening. I cannot handle this. I am doomed. They hate me. I am worthless. That second layer amplifies stress and makes it harder to learn. When you remove the second layer, the system can process the first layer. Then learning happens. Growth happens. Anti-fragility becomes possible. Riley begins to apply this to daily micro-stress, waiting in line, traffic, slow replies, confusing instructions, small conflicts. Each becomes a training moment. Instead of getting irritated and feeding irritation, Riley practices noticing. This is impatience. This is craving for control. Riley breathes. Riley relaxes the body. Riley returns to the present. The irritation passes faster. Over time, Riley becomes less reactive. Life feels easier, not because it is easier, but because the mind is less at war. Now, an essential part of equanimity is not clinging to pleasant things either. Many people focus only on handling pain, but clinging to pleasure also creates fragility because it creates fear of loss. If your happiness depends on everything going well, you become fragile. Equanimity allows you to enjoy good moments without needing them to stay forever. That makes you freer. Riley learns this when something goes well. Praise arrives. The old pattern is craving more praise, more validation, fear of losing it. That fear creates anxiety even in success. Riley practices equanimity. Riley enjoys the praise with gratitude and lets it pass. Riley returns to effort. This reduces dependence on external approval. That independence is anti-fragile because when approval disappears, Riley does not collapse. Now let us bring in relationships, because relationships are where emotional fragility often shows up most strongly. Riley has a habit of taking things personally. A friend cancels plans and Riley feels rejected. A partner is quiet and Riley assumes anger. A colleague is brief and Riley assumes dislike. These assumptions create anxiety and conflict. The mind becomes fragile because it constantly scans for threat. Equanimity changes this by creating a pause between perception and conclusion. Riley learns to hold uncertainty. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are tired. Maybe it is not about me. Riley practices asking clear questions instead of making stories. This reduces conflict. Relationships become steadier. Riley becomes less fragile socially. And here is the anti-fragile result. When conflict does arise, Riley can handle it with more maturity. Riley can listen without collapsing. Riley can speak without attacking. Each conflict becomes training in communication. Riley becomes better because conflict happened, not worse. Now, we should address the spiritual dimension because equanimity is not only emotional management. It is also wisdom about impermanence. Everything changes. If you fight change, you suffer. If you learn to meet change, You become resilient. Antifragility is essentially friendship with change. It is the capacity to adapt and learn as conditions shift. Equanimity is the inner friendship with change. It says, "This is changing, and I can stay present." When you really internalize impermanence, you stopped reading difficulty as a personal attack from the universe. You stop treating discomfort as proof you are failing. You start treating experience as a flow. You learn to surf. Riley begins to meditate more consistently. In meditation, Riley watches sensations arise and pass. An itch arises, passes. I thought arises, passes. A wave of sadness arises, passes. A moment of calm arises, passes. Riley sees impermanence directly. This changes how Riley responds in daily life. When anxiety arises, Riley remembers, "This too will pass," not as a slogan, as a memory of direct observation. Anxiety becomes less scary. When anger arises, Riley remembers, "This is a wave." Anger becomes less commanding. This is equanimity becoming embodied. Now let us talk about how you can apply this without becoming overwhelmed. Start with small, manageable stressors. The minor irritations of the day are perfect training. Practice equanimity there. Pause. Breathe. Feel. Release story. Choose a wise action. Then gradually work with bigger stressors: feedback, disappointment, conflict, uncertainty. Always include recovery, sleep, rest, supportive relationships, gentle movement, quiet time, reflection. Recovery is part of anti-fragility, and keep compassion at the center. Without compassion, you turn practice into self-punishment. Self-punishment makes you fragile. Now, I want to share a closing story that captures the essence. Riley meets a mentor named Dana. Dana has been through real hardship, health issues, career setbacks, loss, and yet Dana feels steady. Riley asks, "What is your secret?" Dana says, "I stopped asking life to be easy. I started asking my mind to be honest." Then Dana adds, "Every time something hard happens, I practice 3 things. I allow the feeling. I choose the next step wisely. I let the rest go." That is equanimity. And over time, hard things stopped making me smaller. They made me clearer. Riley realizes that is anti-fragility, not turning into stone, turning into clarity. This is what I want you to take from today. You do not need a life without stress to be happy. You need a mind trained to meet stress without self-destruction. Equanimity is that training. And when equanimity becomes stable, stress becomes less of a threat and more of a teacher. You become the kind of person who can face uncertainty and still be kind, face criticism and still learn, face loss and still love, face success and still stay humble. That is true strength. Thank you for being here with me today. If you have a moment when a challenge made you wiser, or a moment when you felt fragile and want to become steadier, share your story in the comments. Your experience can help someone else feel less alone. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay connected if you want more teachings that turn real-life stress into real-life practice. Until next time, keep practicing the pause, keep building the steady heart, and remember that equanimity is not the absence of storms. It is the skill of becoming stronger and kinder through them.